This is Gemara Metziah Daf Kof Yud Gimel, and we're holding on Kof Yud Gimel Amid Aleph as we're sort of wrapping up Baruch Hashem's incredible Masechta and segueing from the halachos of Baltalin, of withholding wages, etc., etc. We go into similar halachos, which are that of a mashkoin, in that what are you allowed to take, when do you have to return it, the collateral on a loan, etc., etc. So says the Mishnah, Kufi Gimel Amar Aleph, Hamalves Chaveiroi Lo Yimshachenu Ella Bebezdin. Din number one, you're only allowed to take a mashkin, a security, in Bezdin. Number two, you're not allowed to enter into his house to take the mashkin. Shenemar, as the Baal says, you got to stand outside. Part B of the Mishnah, if the borrower has two kalim, they're worth the same value, you only take one of them. And if an item that you took is a nighttime item, like a pillow, you got to return it each night. If it's a daytime item like a plow, you got to return it by yoy. If the loive dies, then you don't have an obligation to return the machshkoin to the yarshim. Rashba Goimer says of Shim Gamliel, af la'atzmai einay machzir ela'ad sheloishim yoim, till 30 days. Ulahalon moichran bebezdin. From 30 days and on, you sell them in Bezdin to collect the halva. So big machlekes over here, Tinu Shim Gamliel and the Tanakama, which the Gemara will explain precisely. But says the Gemara, let's start with the first part of the Mishnah, which is that you only take the mashkin bebezdin. Amar Shmuel teaches Shmuel shliach bezdin mit mintach nituchein. Sheikh Bezdin can seize, can grab the item from the person, even in the middle of the street. Avol mashkin iloi, but he's not allowed to take away the mashkin by entering into his house. Says the Gemara, if you look at the first Rashi, explains, Afu einoi Rashi likanis lebeisai. Sheikh Bezdin is not allowed to enter his house, l'mashkanai. Elorayehu bashok, if you see him in the street, then umanatik davar sheichas biyad mena. Then he could grab his watch as a mashkin. But even the Sheikh Bezdin says Shmuel cannot enter his house to take the mashkin. Asks the Gemara Vatanan, but we learned in our Mishnah, Bezdin, the mashkin should be taken only a Bezdin, Mechlal to a Bezdin, Mashkin. Sounds like a Bezdin. Well, yes, take a mashkin, which means Bezdin goes into his house and takes the mashkin. Amr Lacha Shmuel, no. Ema lo yinatchenu el bebezdin. Know what it means? It means that lo yinatchenu bebezdin, we're not allowed to take anything from him, only through Bezdin. Bezdin could go and Yinatzchenu could seize the item, but again, not by entering his house, but only by taking it from him in the street. Says the Gemara, this is logical. Why Tiktani Seifa? End of the Mishnah says, Mani. Who is that referring to that can I enter his house, take the mashkin? We already know that from the Reisha that the Baal Chayv himself is not allowed to go into his house because the Reisha taught us that has to be a Sheikh Bezdin. So we see that Sheikh Bezdin can only take from him in the street. Says the Gemara, no raya. Someone lends his friend and the Baal Chayv can never grab from the borrower. So we see from this brisa clearly the other way of learning the Mishnah. Therefore, we don't have a raya from the Mishnah to the din of Shmuel that you only allowed to take the mashkin from him in the street and not entering into his house. So now, Masiv Rav Yosef, 8 lines from the white lines, asks Rav Yosef on the din of Shmuel. Says in the pasuk, you should not take the rechayim or the rechav as a mashkin. Other things you're allowed to take from him as a security. The pasuk continues, you should not take for him as a security the garment of an almana. You could yes take. So man, When this brisa discusses, when these psukim discuss taking these items as security, who is the one taking them? Pasuk says Baal Chayiv cannot come and take it. Elolav shliach bezdin. And what do we see? That the shliach bezdin is allowed to, yes, enter into his house to take the mashkin. Kashon Shmuel answers Gemara Tirgum Rav Papa Reider Rav Nachman Kameider Rav Yosef Amar Rav Papa Reider Rav Yosef Kameider Rav Yosef Lo'ilam Bebal Chayiv. Really, it is talking about the Baal Chayiv entering to take the mashkin. V'lavar love b'shnei lavim. And for the second, we're just going to say that there's two lavim to not take these items. Number one, and number two, cannot enter his house to take these items. Tashema, the Gemara tries another kasha and Shmuel Mimash, which an emmer from the fact of Pasuk says, you stand outside. Do we not know from there that the person that you're taking the money from, the guy who did not pay the loan, brings the security outside? So why does the pasuk explicate that the man has to come and bring out to the mashkain? Says the Gemara, you know why? The Rabbi Shliach Bezdin. My love, Shliach Bezdin, kil loiva, is like the loiva that he could go into his house to take the item. So it's a kasha on Shmuel, because again, Shmuel said the Shliach Bezdin cannot enter into the house of the loiva, and rather can only take the mashkin from him in the street. Says the Gemara, as we turn over to Kuf Yud Gimel, Amid Beis, Loi, Shliach Bezdin, Bimalva. It's not referring to that the Shliach Bezdin is like the Loiva, but rather the Shliach Bezdin is like the Malva, meaning that you stand outside, that you're not allowed to enter into his house. Tashema, top of Kafikim Lamed Aleph, a third attempt at a kasha on Shmuel. Salmas Reyacha, says the pasuk, if you take the clothing of your friend as a mashkin b'shliach bezdin, akasim midaber. Atayim b'shliach bezdin, akasim midaber. You're telling me the pasuk about shliach bezdin? Oh, you know, I love about chayv. When the pasuk says, when the pasuk says you should not come to his house to extract the mashkin or ibal chayv amar. So what do we do with the other pasuk of im chaval tachval salmas reyacha? B'shliach bezdin, akasim midaber. Talking about a shliach bezdin. So what do we see? We see clearly from the pasuk that the Shliach Bezdin could, yes, go into his house to take the item, not like Shmuel. So finally, the Gemara concedes, you are correct. Tanoihi, it's a machlokes Tanoim, whether one could enter into, whether Shliach Bezdin is allowed to enter into the house of the Levet to take the mashkin or not. Titan, you learned in a brisa 10 lines down. First one line is Shliach. Shliach Bezdin, Shabal Lemashkin, Shliach Bezdin comes to take a mashkin, lo yikanas lebeis, Lemashkin, lo cannot enter his house, like Shmuel. Eloi midbachos, velamaitzi, lo mashkin, shenemar, bachos tamoy vish. V'tani yidach, we have another brace of Alchav, Shabal Lemashkin, lo yikanas lebeis, Lemashkin, lo. Eloi midbachos, veloi nichnas, umaitzi, lo mashkin, lo brings it out, shenemar, bachos tamoy. Shliach Bezdin, Shabal Lemashkin, I teaches brace number 2, Arisa, nichnas lebeis, umim mashkin, lo. And the Shliach Bezdin could enter his house. Now I'll take a mashkin for something that he needs for food. So we see clearly in this brisa that it is a machlokes tanoim as to whether the Shliach Bezdin enters into his house or not. Continues the Gemara. The second brisa we just quoted started discussing the different items that you could take as a mashkin. It began by saying you cannot take items of oichel nefesh. So continues Gemara 10 lines from the wide lines, quoting V'nasan mita umita umatza la'ashir. Continues the Gemara quoting the end of that brisa that he's allowed to give a bed, another bed, and that's when he is an ashir. Mita mapatzani. When he's an ani, you don't have to give him a thick shemaka bed, but rather you have to give him a mat. You have to make sure that the borrower, the loiva, even though you're taking a mashkin from him, he has what he needs to survive, to live. However, you do not have to leave him for his wife, his kids, the same item. So too is the same thing by arachin. By an erachin, the value of a person. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Ikar sodar be'erachin sif. Exact opposite. The ikar din of Sidur, of assessing, of arranging, of ensuring that the person has that which he needs, is written in the Torah by Erechin. So why are you telling me that whatever the borrower does, so too the Erechin is opposite? Alema, the opposite, you're right. Okay, so Amar Mar says the Gemara, 4 lines from the white lines. Let's delve a little bit deeper into this brisa. What did the brisa teach us? Says the Gemara, Leman. It said mita umita, which is clearly 2 beds. Who are you leaving the second bed for? The Brisa said clearly that you're not leaving a bed for his wife and kids. Ella must be for himself. So Tartilamali, why does the guy need 2 different beds? Says the Gemara, because what was a bed used for? One is to eat on. Beds for them were chairs. Bed for them were couches. And another one is to sleep upon. Kiddush Shmuel. On the second white line, as Shmuel has taught us, Amar Shmuel, Kol miliyadana asusayu. I know the remedy for everything. Levar mehanitzlas. Aside for 3 things, says Shmuel. Number 1, man da'achal ahini merira. One who eats a bitter date, aliba rekana, on an empty stomach, says Shmuel, I don't know what to do for such a person. Number 2, man da'asar mitna. One who binds the kisna retiva achartse, a damp rope around his hips. And number 3, man da'achal nama lo miski arba garamidi. One who eats bread doesn't walk 4 amais before going to sleep. So what do we see from here? Says the Gemara, interesting raya from Shmuel. But clearly, you got to eat, you got to get up and walk, and then go to sleep. So says the Gemara, therefore you have to give the guy 2 different beds. So you'll get up after you eat, and then go into the bed to go to sleep. Says the Gemara, Tana Danagamed Nachmin. 5 lines into the white lines. Amar lei. Says Rav Nachman, now we're even allowed to sell the borrower's items that we take as a mashkin. Excuse me. Hashta zabune mizavninan lei, sadure bisadrinan lei. Is it possible that we assess it for him to leave him? Says Gemara, selling here doesn't really make sense. Are you selling his items, or are you evaluating his items? Says the Gemara, what do you mean? It means do we sell it to him? For him? From him? We return it to him at night. So what is going on over here? So explains the Gemara, Tana Kirashbag. The Tana is learning like Shimon Gamliel. Tana Kamei V'achi Kamerli. Hash no Shimon Gamliel Zavunim Zamnin Alei. Shimon Gamliel held you allowed to sell the items. That was the end of the Mishnah. Sadurim is Sadrin Alei. So is there any reason to assess what the items are worth? It's not. Rashbag, even for himself, you only have to return them after 30 days. Says the Gemara, 1 second, still, Rav Nachman. How do you know? When Rav Shimon Gamliel said that after 30 days you could sell his items, it means you could sell it entirely. Maybe no Rav Shimon Gamliel meant that until 30 days, you return it to him intact. You return to him what he needs. And that which he doesn't need, which is not as critical to day-to-day life functions, we do not return to him. So if that would be the case, Shimon Gamliel would be agreeing that we still would have to evaluate what are the basic needs that the guy has. Explains the Gemara, if what you're saying is correct, what do you mean? Everything he needs. Tamar Abayos teaches Abaye. 10 lines in the bottom. First word in line is Rav Shimon Gamliel. Rav Shimon Gamliel, Rav Shimon, Rav Yishmael, Rav Akiva, Kulus Fir Loho, Kol Yisrael B'nei Melachim. A famous statement. So says the Gemara, it can't be that Rav Shimon Gamliel holds. We evaluate what are the quote-unquote necessary items for the loiva, because everything's necessary. Klal Yisrael are B'nei Melachim. And from here, the Gemara takes a moment to segue to figure out what are all the sources for these Amarayim that hold the Klal Yisrael b'nei Malachim. Rishin Gamliel detinan lo yisalof lo yisachardol. Says Rishin Gamliel, says the Mishnah, one's allowed to clear away, not the lof, not the chardol. These items are muksa, and therefore there's no reason for them. Whereas comes on Rishin Gamliel and he says matir. No, you're allowed to clear away these items belof memnei shumeichel arvin, because these are foods for the ravens, which are items that chashava people have, and therefore everyone is allowed to clear them away, because everyone could potentially have a raven. Rabbi Shimon, which was opinion number 2, Titinan b'nei malachim sachin shemin vered al gabi makosehem. B'nei malachim are allowed to rub vered oil on their wounds. B'shabbos kin darkan losach b'chol. Number 3, if someone owes 1,000 zuz, v'lavash itztala bas me'aman, and he's wearing a jacket worth 100 mana, which is 10,000 zuz. We take it from him. We say, buddy, you owe this guy money. Here's a jacket that's worth less, and we sell that item, and we pay back the loan. No, you can't take away this guy's chashav jacket. Why not? Because Kol Yisrael Ru'iyim La'isai, it's the law. Everyone is right for that expensive cloak. Therefore, you have to sell the expensive one. And finally, so those are the 3 cases that these different people held. Says the Gemara, that which we originally thought, back to our sugya, that we give the guy what's chazi to him, pillow and a blanket. But says the Gemara, but a plow, what's chazi to him? They're all the same thing. There's no more chashav plow, less chashav plow. So what do you mean you'll give him that which is chazi to him? Amar Rabba Macharisha the Kasba. We're talking about a case, the guy had an interesting silver plow. So that would be, we would assess that he clearly doesn't need that. We would sell it and pay the difference. We'll pick it up from here, the Siyata Dishmaya.